After 7 years with Sarah Thompson, Daniel Patterson learned that in her circles, their relationship was just seen as him being on call. Before she left for her arranged marriage, Daniel accepted the shockingly large parting gift and, just as she wanted, vanished from Chicago. 3 years later, Sarah's father passed away. She became the undisputed head of the Thompson family, immediately divorced her husband, and spared no expense to track down Daniel, who was struggling as a delivery driver. Holding him again, the woman who was always so stunningly aloof shed tears for the first time. "Daniel, I had no choice back then, but from now on, I will never let you suffer another moment of hardship." After that, she began to make it up to Daniel with an almost frantic intensity, treating him better than anyone could imagine. She bought trending spots on Twitter to announce their relationship and even transferred half of the Thompson Corporation's stock into his name, ensuring no one in Chicago would ever dare to disrespect him again. The only slight issue was an injury Daniel had sustained as a delivery driver, which resulted in a low sperm count, but Sarah insisted she did not mind at all. 3 years into their marriage, Daniel's health finally improved, and his doctor gave him the green light to start a family. He eagerly took the report to the private club Sarah frequented, excited to tell her he could finally give her the child she always wanted. But before he could even push open the door, he heard the cheerful voices from inside. "Congrats, Sarah, on baby number 2. I thought you hated Caleb Vaughn for breaking you and Daniel up. How come you two are in bed together so often now? Daniel doesn't have any kids, but you and Caleb are about to have enough for a baseball team." Through the haze of colorful lights, Sarah's lazy voice drifted out. "He's just so dull in bed. Predictable, even. I can't stand monotony. I need something with a little more life. Oh yes, Caleb is definitely lively. I hear he knows 18 positions for a single night. You must love that, Sarah. How could I not? I snuck off for months to have his baby without Daniel knowing. Last month, when Daniel was sick in the hospital, Sarah was going stir-crazy. She claimed it was a business trip, but she actually spent the entire month tangled up with Caleb in Miami. The way they were all over each other. Wow. I bet he didn't even let you out of bed. Did he, Sarah?" Amidst the suggestive banter, Sarah casually set her glass down on the table. "Don't let Caleb Vaughn hear you say that," she said. "If he gets annoyed, he'll just cover my neck in bite marks again tonight." After a moment of silence, the room erupted in even louder laughter. "Ooh, listen to Sarah, bragging again. Okay, we get it. You love that possessive, alpha male type like Caleb." In the middle of the uproar, Daniel felt as if he'd been plunged into ice water. He only snapped out of it when a waiter asked with concern, "Sir, you look unwell. Do you need any help?" Daniel came back to himself, his face ashen, and whispered, "Please don't tell them I was here. Thank you." He stumbled out of the club, and, as the cold wind hit him, he doubled over, gagging. His eyes were bloodshot. With a trembling hand, he pulled up his iMessage history from before Sarah's business trip last month. "Daniel, an urgent project came up. I have to go out of town for a bit. Please take care of yourself while you're recovering. Wait for me, okay?" Her tone was so sincere, and she had attached a 6-figure wire transfer. At the time, he hadn't suspected a thing. He'd even thoughtfully packed her some medicine for potential hangovers from business dinners. Even when she returned and the pills were untouched, he never questioned it. It was because in the 3 years since Sarah had found him again, she had acted as though she was terrified of losing him. If he was even a few minutes late coming home, she would cling to him, asking over and over, "Daniel, you're not going to leave me again, are you? Those 2 years without you were a living hell. I can't live without you." Back then, he would always hold her gently in return, softly reassuring her, "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere." But now, a deep chill settled over him. The words he'd overheard in the club echoed in his mind, each one a vicious slap across the face. So, all her supposed fear of losing him was a lie while she was sleeping with another man. And not just any man, but the one she always claimed to despise. Daniel had his pride. Having been forced out once, he refused to let her humiliate him a second time. That night, he had a lawyer draw up divorce papers. When he pushed open the door to Sarah's office, papers in hand, she was on the phone with someone. Her tone was sharp, but he could see an undeniable smile playing on her lips. The moment she saw Daniel, she hung up. Daniel didn't see the caller's name, but he didn't have to. He already knew. Sarah rushed over to him. Seeing how pale he was, she immediately had someone fetch a blanket to drape over his shoulders. "It's so cold tonight. What are you doing here?" she asked softly. "Did you miss me?" Then she noticed the papers in his hand, and her expression cleared. "Oh, if you picked out a new house or a car, just have my assistant sign for it. You don't have to come all this way." Daniel looked at her, at the gentle expression that was still on her face, and started to speak. "No, it's about a divorce." He never finished the word divorce. Her assistant knocked and rushed in, whispering urgently in her ear, "Ms. Thompson, we have a problem. Mr. Vaughn is here. He's furious that you hung up on him and is demanding you come out and explain yourself, or he's going to start wrecking the lobby." Sarah's expression changed in an instant. Without even waiting for Daniel to finish, she rushed for the door, calling over her shoulder, "Daniel, something urgent's come up. Wait here for me. I'll be right back." She hurried away, not even noticing that in her haste, she had shoved him aside. Unsteady on his feet, he tripped on the edge of the rug, his forehead cracking against the corner of a desk. A sharp, searing pain made his vision go dark for a moment. When it cleared, it was replaced by a wave of overwhelming bitterness. Daniel waited in the office for 3 solid hours. Finally, his phone buzzed. A friend of Sarah's had just updated her Facebook. Someone made the big boss angry again. Doesn't matter how proud a woman is, she still ends up on her knees, shining his shoes. The photo showed a graceful woman on one knee, gently wiping a speck of dust from Caleb Vaughn's shoe. That seemed to answer everything. There was nothing left to wait for. Daniel gave a small, humorless laugh and made a phone call. "Hello. Please cancel and dispose of the baby items I had on order." "Thank you." Before processing the request, the customer service agent confirmed, "Mr. Patterson, you spent months sourcing these items from overseas. They're quite valuable. Are you absolutely sure you want to cancel and have them disposed of?" Daniel paused. He suddenly remembered all the times over the past 3 years Sarah had talked about wanting a child with him. "Daniel," she had said, "a child would tie us together. You wouldn't have the heart to leave me a second time. I want you by my side forever." Her words had sounded so full of love back then. Now, they were just a bitter joke. Daniel nodded slightly. "Yes, I'm sure. She was right. A child would be a tie." But he was leaving, and nothing was going to stop him. Not even the child he had longed for. He pressed a hand to his stinging eyes, silently apologizing to the baby he would now never meet. After that, he went to an urgent care clinic to get his forehead looked at, stayed the night for observation, and then left. As he stepped out of the building, Sarah hurried toward him, taking his arm. "Daniel, why did you leave last night without waiting for me?" she asked, her voice urgent. "I signed those papers you brought and had them sent to the house. My assistant told me you were at the hospital first thing this morning. Are you sick? What's wrong?" The concern in her eyes was as real as ever, but Daniel wasn't in the mood to play along. His voice was flat. "I'm Fina. I just came to get my head checked." Sarah froze, her eyes finally landing on the wound at his temple, partially hidden by his hair. Even with ointment on it, the area was still swollen and bruised. She suddenly remembered shoving him in her rush the night before. A flicker of guilt crossed her face as she reached for his forehead. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." Before she could finish, a sharp male voice cut in. "Well, Ms. Thompson, still so affectionate with your current husband? Can't you two keep it together, even at a hospital entrance?" It was Caleb Vaughn. He wore a perfectly tailored red suit, his hair slicked back with impeccable precision, his usual flamboyant style on full display. Unlike other days, however, he was flanked by an entourage of at least 10 young, beautiful models. Daniel felt Sarah's hand tighten on his arm. "Caleb, what is this?" she asked, her voice cold. "What's it look like?" Caleb said, casually wrapping an arm around one of the models and gesturing to the baby she was holding. "I'm taking my son for a checkup. Someone has to, since his mother is such a heartless woman." His eyes slid over to Daniel, a smirk playing on his lips. "Instead of worrying about your ex, you should probably pay more attention to your current husband. We wouldn't want him getting upset and taking it out on me." Daniel had no patience for their games. He pulled his arm free from Sarah's grasp. "You two talk." Sarah caught up to him once he was outside. "Daniel, are you upset?" she asked carefully. "I had no idea he'd be here." Daniel cut her off. "No, I just want to go home." The fresh dressing on his forehead was beginning to throb with a dull ache. Sarah could see he wasn't feeling well, so she didn't press him, simply leading him to the car. On the way home, she tried to lighten the mood, but her efforts were cut short when her phone screen lit up with a new message. "Heartless woman, I'm at the police station. If you're not here in 10 minutes, I'm picking one of those models to be our son's new legal mother." Sarah slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop threw Daniel forward, making his head spin, but Sarah didn't even look at him. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her lips a thin, hard line. She let out a laugh that was pure fury and turned off the screen. After a moment, she softened her tone. Daniel, something urgent came up at work. Can you get out here? I'll have my assistant come pick you up in a little while, okay? Though it was phrased as a question, Daniel knew it wasn't a request. He said nothing, simply gathered his things and got out of the car. The sky had grown dark, and a biting wind sliced through his clothes. He pulled his coat tighter, coughing, and waited by the side of the road for an hour, but no car ever came. Sarah had never called for a car. It made sense, he supposed. When you're dealing with something as important as a birth certificate, it's easy to forget about trivial little things. The road was remote, and a cold drizzle began to fall, making it even harder to see. Daniel couldn't hail a cab, so he had no choice but to walk home. By the time he reached the Thompson estate, he was soaked through. A maid rushed to give him a dry towel and a change of clothes, but by midnight, he was burning up with a fever. The room was dark, and though a heavy comforter was piled on top of him, a deep chill seeped into his bones, leaving him shivering and too weak to even sit up. He wasn't sure how much time had passed before the bedroom door creaked open. Silhouetted against the hall light, Sarah tiptoed closer and leaned down to check on him. The moment her fingers brushed his cheek, she recoiled, shocked by how hot he was. She ordered someone to bring a thermometer and stared at the reading, which was nearing 104 degrees. She turned and snapped at the staff in the hallway. Are you all completely useless? He's burning up like this, and none of you noticed? Outside, the maids fell to their knees in terror. Sarah didn't have time to deal with them. She quickly fetched fever reducer and warm water, then helped Daniel sit up, cradling him against her as she gently helped him take the medicine. As the fever began to break, Daniel finally found the strength to open his eyes. Sarah's face lit up with relief. Daniel, you scare me to death. You must be hungry. I'll go make you something to eat. She then rushed downstairs to the kitchen. Daniel watched her go, a sense of surreal distance washing over him. Sarah's tenderness now felt like honey-coated poison. It offered a moment of sweetness, followed by a long, gnawing pain. A few minutes later, Sarah returned with a steaming, fragrant bowl of noodle soup. It was a simple, clear broth noodle soup, his favorite. Sarah had never lifted a finger in her life. She was always the one being served. But over the last 3 years, she had learned to cook all of Daniel's favorite dishes. She had especially perfected this simple soup from his hometown. She lifted a mouthful of noodles to his lips. Here, be careful, it's hot. The fever had drained him, and he was genuinely starving, so he didn't refuse. He took the chopsticks and tasted it. The next moment, he was leaning over the edge of the bed, vomiting violently. A maid heard the commotion and rushed in. Ma'am, why is there shrimp in the soup? She exclaimed in a panic. Have you forgotten that Mr. Patterson is severely allergic? Sarah stood frozen. Another maid quickly pulled the first one aside, whispering, Hush, don't say any more. You're new here, you don't know. Mr. Vaughn loves seafood. Whenever he'd throw a fit and gifts of watches and cars wouldn't work, Ms. Thompson would cook seafood for him herself. She must have just forgotten. The maid's hushed whispers reached Daniel's ears, each word a dagger in his heart, the pain so sharp he could barely breathe. So, deep in Sarah's subconscious, Caleb's preferences were the ones she remembered most clearly. Her so-called hatred for Caleb was just a story he'd told himself. A rash was already breaking out on his neck, and it was becoming hard to breathe. Sarah saw what was happening and, forgetting the shrimp, rushed to help him up to take him to the hospital. But Daniel shoved her away, his voice a hoarse, furious cry. Get away from me. I don't want your help. Daniel had never lost his temper like that before, and for a moment, Sarah was too shocked to move. A second later, Daniel collapsed from the severe allergic reaction. In the last moments before he lost consciousness, he heard Sarah's frantic shouting. Get the car. We're taking him to the hospital now. Hurry. When he slowly came to, he was in a hospital room. The first things he saw were the white ceiling tiles and a haggard face. Sarah looked as if she had been there for days. Always so put together, her hair was a mess, and she had dark circles under her eyes as she clutched his hand. When she saw he was awake, she leaned closer. Daniel, are you feeling any better? She looked down, her voice thick with regret. I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. I was just rushing, and I forgot about your allergy. And please, don't listen to what the maids were saying. It's all an act with Caleb. He's just so dramatic, and he used to always demand seafood. That's the only reason I remember. Don't read too much into it. She looked sincere, but Daniel couldn't find a single ounce of truth in her words. He just turned his head away wearily. "I'm tired. Please leave." He didn't want to look at her. Sarah's expression turned to panic. Then, as if remembering something, she presented a box to him and opened it. Inside lay a magnificent, diamond-encrusted watch, obviously worth a fortune. Sarah looked at him, her tone pleading. "Daniel, please don't be angry. My grandmother's birthday is in 2 days. You know you're her favorite in the whole family. Please, will you come with me to her party?" The refusal was on the tip of his tongue, but Daniel swallowed it back, a familiar ache spreading through his chest. When he and Sarah had first married, the entire Thompson family had treated him with contempt. Only Grandma Thompson had taken his hand kindly and called him by his name. Since he was planning to leave anyway, he could think of it as one last birthday celebration for her. Seeing his expression soften, Sarah knew he had agreed. She immediately had a tailored suit and new shoes brought to the room. Daniel let them dress him like a mannequin. He and Sarah arrived at the party right on time. He just never expected to see Caleb Vaughn standing in the middle of the ballroom. Sarah's face darkened instantly, and she moved to stand in front of Daniel. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited. She's not just your grandmother. Why can't I be here?" Caleb shot back, rolling his eyes, but then he stopped short. His eyes fell on the watch on Daniel's wrist, and his expression turned thunderous, because on his own wrist was the very same model, only without the diamonds. The comparison made it all instantly clear. He gritted his teeth. "Well done, Sarah. You gave me the cheap knockoff version of your husband's gift. Just great." Furious, he ripped the watch from his wrist and slammed it onto the marble floor before storming off. The sound of it shattering drew the eyes of every guest in the room. Staring at the broken pieces, Daniel felt no satisfaction at being the favored one. He just felt sick. He was sickened that while buying a gift to placate him, Sarah had also thought to buy one for her ex-husband. Just how much space did Caleb Vaughn occupy in her mind? Sarah watched Caleb's retreating back, her first instinct to run after him. She stopped herself, turning back to Daniel. "Daniel, let me explain. The watch was just what?" Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just a little something extra you picked up? What's next? Are you going to offer yourself up as a bonus gift?" A flicker of guilt crossed Sarah's eyes. She opened her mouth to argue, but at that moment, a collective gasp rose from the crowd across the room. "Look out! The chandelier is falling." The argument died on their lips as they both turned toward the commotion. In the next instant, Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The massive crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling was swaying violently, and directly beneath it stood Caleb Vaughn. In a split second, acting on pure instinct, Sarah shoved Daniel aside and sprinted toward Caleb without a moment's hesitation. With a deafening crash, the chandelier came down. At the very last second, Sarah managed to grab Caleb and pull him out of the way, tackling him into a safer area. Daniel, thrown off balance, stumbled backward and crashed directly into a tower of champagne glasses. The tower collapsed, drenching him in ice-cold champagne, leaving him soaked and humiliated. The winter air made the sudden chill unbearable, causing him to shiver uncontrollably as the guests around them began to whisper. Despite the loud crash, Sarah never once looked back at him. She was gripping Caleb's arm, her voice sharp with fear and anger. "Are you an idiot? That thing was about to crush you. Why didn't you move?" Caleb, still shaken, snapped back. "So what if it did? What would you care? You obviously don't give a damn about me, so I don't need your—" Ow! He broke off with a hiss, looking down and clutching his arm in pain. A shard of glass had gashed his arm, and blood was already seeping through his fingers. Sarah's expression tightened. She immediately helped him to his feet and hurried him backstage. All the while, Daniel remained forgotten in the corner. He hadn't expected anything different, yet a sharp pain still lanced through his chest, a dull ache twisting into something agonizing. A bitter smile touched Daniel's lips as he trudged, soaked and miserable, toward the backstage area. A server found him a dry change of clothes and brought him a cup of hot tea, which finally chased away the chill. Daniel thanked him quietly. "Please tell Grandma Thompson that something came up and I won't be able to stay for the rest of her party." "I'm very sorry." After the server left, Daniel unclasped the watch from his wrist. He dropped the priceless diamond timepiece into the trash can as if it were worthless. Then he pulled open the door and prepared to leave. Most of the staff had rushed out to deal with the chandelier, leaving the hallway deserted. Just as he was heading for the exit, someone blocked his path. Caleb Vaughn stood there, his arm now bandaged, his earlier panic replaced by the smug look of a victor. "Mr. Patterson, running away so soon? Let me tell you a little secret. That chandelier? I rigged it." He leaned in close to Daniel, smiling with satisfaction as he watched him tense up. He let out a soft sneer. "Sarah talks a big game about loving you, but when she thought I was in danger, her first instinct was to save me. You can't fake instinct. Just admit it. You're a complete failure as a husband. So what if a nobody like you married up? She's been over you for a long time, but I guess I can't blame her. A decade of the same single move in bed would bore anyone to tears." The malice in Caleb's words made Daniel flinch. His years on the road had taken a toll on his health, and he was often hesitant to push himself in bed. How could Sarah share something so private with someone else? Did she use his private struggles as pillow talk to entertain her lover? A wave of pure rage made Daniel tremble. He swung, his fist connecting squarely with Caleb's jaw. Caleb's head snapped to the side, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. "You hit me," he yelled, his voice a mixture of shock and fury. The great Caleb Vaughn is acting like a cheap homewrecker. Why wouldn't I dare? The word homewrecker struck a nerve. Caleb grabbed Daniel's arm. "You worthless piece of trash, who do you think you?" He trailed off as he heard familiar footsteps approaching. A cunning glint appeared in his eye. He grabbed Daniel's hand, used it to shove himself backward, and with a loud cry of alarm, tumbled down the nearby flight of stairs. "Caleb!" Sarah's eyes widened, and the bottle of antiseptic she was holding crashed to the floor. She ran down the stairs to Caleb's side. Even though it was a short flight of stairs, and he clearly wasn't badly hurt, her eyes were wide with panic. "Get him to a hospital, now!" Then she stood and walked over to Daniel, grabbing his wrist. Her voice was filled with a mix of confusion and accusation. "Daniel, why did you push him?" She paused, as if she had figured it all out. "Is this because I saved him? Are you jealous? I would have helped anyone in that situation. It had nothing to do with him being my ex. How could you attack him over it?" Her grip tightened, and she was too agitated to notice Daniel wince in pain. His eyes burned with unshed tears, but he suddenly laughed. "Sarah, I'm only going to say this once. I didn't push him. If you don't believe me, then we'll get a divorce." His voice was quiet, but it held a conviction that was impossible to ignore. Sarah froze and let go of his wrist, her face a mask of disappointment. "Daniel, if you did it, just admit it. You know I wouldn't actually punish you. How could you threaten me with divorce?" Just then, Caleb let out a soft groan from the floor. Sarah immediately turned to her security team. "Take Mr. Patterson home. He is not to leave the house without my permission." Daniel looked up in disbelief, but before he could protest, several guards were escorting him out. He was now a prisoner in his own home, under supervision by Sarah's order. The doors to his room didn't open again until the next morning. Sarah stood in the morning light, her expression unreadable. Her voice was hoarse. "Daniel, Caleb was very shaken up yesterday. I need you to come with me and apologize." Daniel's refusal was immediate and firm. "I told you I didn't push him. I'm not apologizing. Does the truth even matter?" Sarah cut in wearily. She took 2 steps toward him, an intimidating aura around her that he had never seen before. "There were no cameras in that stairwell. Everyone saw you push him. He's my ex-husband. I can't defend you. Now the Vaughn family wants you held accountable. Unlike you, an orphan, Caleb has the entire Vaughn family backing him up. Do you understand what that means?" The moment the words left her mouth, they both froze. Daniel's parents had died in an accident when he was a child, and growing up shuffled between relatives had left him with lingering health issues. It was the deepest wound he carried, and Sarah had just ripped it wide open. She knew she'd gone too far. She rubbed her temples. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I was just so angry. I didn't mean that." The sharp splash echoed in the room as the contents of his glass of ice water hit her face. Daniel was trembling with rage, his words forced through clenched teeth. "You didn't mean it? You don't say something like that by accident. You've thought it a million times, haven't you?" Because he had no one, he was forced to leave in disgrace years ago. Because he had no one, he was now expected to bow his head and take the blame. On what grounds? Daniel clenched his jaw, fighting back a wave of bitterness. "I'll tell you this. I would rather die than apologize." Icy water dripped from the ends of Sarah's hair. The flicker of guilt that had been in her eyes was gone, washed away by the water. The hand at her side clenched into a fist. She composed herself and gave a cold command to the guards outside. "Since he refuses to apologize, throw him in the pool." It was the dead of winter in Chicago, where even the slightest breeze felt like a razor blade. Daniel was dragged outside and thrown into the backyard pool, which was already filmed with a thin sheet of ice. The impact shattered it, and the frigid water surged over him, filling his nose and mouth, a cold so absolute it felt like it was seeping into his bones. He fought his way to the surface, but just as his fingers brushed the edge of the pool, a hand shoved his head back under. He could faintly hear Sarah's voice from above the water. Again, that single, cold word was all it took. He was forced under once more, over and over, again and again, until the air in his lungs gave out and his limbs began to go numb in the icy water. On what felt like the 100th time, he no longer had the strength to fight his way up. Just as his consciousness began to fade, he was dragged from the pool. Sarah looked down at him, shivering on the concrete, his face a sickly blue. "Send a video of that to the Vaughns," she ordered coldly. "Tell them I've dealt with it, and that the matter is closed. I'm going over there now to apologize in person, and take him to the hospital." With that, she turned and left. Daniel lay there, frozen, a single tear tracing a path down his temple. He lost consciousness on the way to the hospital and only came to again with the sharp smell of antiseptic in his nostrils. Sarah had provided the best medical care money could buy. After 3 days of emergency treatment and a constant supply of expensive, imported drugs, the warmth finally returned to his body. When he woke, a nurse reassured him, "Mr. Patterson, please don't worry. The doctors will make sure there are no lasting complications." Daniel's lips were pale. He didn't respond. His body might recover, but his heart was in pieces. No medicine in the world could fix that. For a full week, he didn't speak a word, letting the medical staff move him around like a doll. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, containing a series of photos. The images showed 2 nearly naked bodies tangled together in a variety of graphic, intimate poses. It was pornography. Beneath the photos was a single line of text. "Mr. Patterson, let me teach you a few moves. I guarantee your wife will never be bored again. She couldn't get enough of me, even right after giving birth." The phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Daniel doubled over, his heart hammering against his ribs as he heaved, a sour taste in his mouth. It was disgusting, utterly disgusting, to think that while he was lying in a hospital bed, Sarah had been with Caleb. The thought made him violently ill. He stumbled into the bathroom and was sick until there was nothing left. After a long time, he picked up his phone with a trembling hand and blocked the number. He stared at the calendar on the wall, repeating a mantra to himself. Just 3 more days. In 3 days, the divorce would be final, and he could leave this sickening city for good. He spent the night fighting waves of nausea, and the next day, he checked himself out of the hospital to go home and pack. He had just pulled his suitcase from the closet when the front door was kicked open. Sarah stormed in and threw her phone down in front of him. "Daniel, have you lost your mind?" she demanded. Confused, Daniel looked at the screen. The moment he saw what was on it, he froze. The photos had been leaked online. In just 2 hours, they were the #1 trending topic on Twitter, spreading like wildfire across the city. The headline read, "Thompson heiress rekindles flame with ex-husband? Explicit private photos leaked." Sarah was incandescent with rage. "Is this how you get your revenge on me and Caleb? Leaking private photos is illegal, you know that. If this affects our stock prices, both the Thompson and the Vaughn families will come after you. How could you be so stupid and vicious? I can't believe you really regret marrying me, right?" Daniel finished the sentence for her. His voice was a raw whisper. "He's just so dull in bed. I need something with a little more life. 18 positions for a single night. All these years, Sarah, how many times have you slept with him behind my back? Were you proud of yourself, Sarah? Watching me come back to you like a fool, loving you, all while you were still sleeping with your ex-husband?" Daniel thought he had already moved past the pain. But having the wound torn open like this, he realized it was still as raw as ever. A flicker of shock and guilt crossed Sarah's face. Before she could speak, her phone rang. It was her assistant. "MS. Thompson, the Vaughns are furious. They traced the leak to a tabloid, and the editor is claiming Mr. Patterson gave them the photos. They're demanding you do something about it now." Caleb was the only Vaughn heir for 3 generations. He'd been treated like a precious jewel his entire life, coddled and protected. There was no way his family would tolerate their darling son's private photos being splashed all over the internet for public consumption. If the Vaughns decided to retaliate, they wouldn't stop until the person responsible was destroyed. Sarah's expression hardened. "Understood. She hung up and gave a crisp order to her security. Call the police and take Mr. Patterson to the station to turn himself in. Daniel's head snapped up. Before he could even begin to resist, he was being forced out the door and shoved into a car. Sarah's voice was low and cold. Daniel, actions have consequences. If you want to stay with me, you need to learn not to provoke people you can't afford to cross. You've been a real headache these past few days. Half an hour later, Daniel was processed into the Cook County Jail. No amount of pleading or protesting did any good. The next 48 hours were a living hell. The place was filled with violent offenders who, upon seeing a clean-cut young man thrown into their midst, looked at him like wolves spotting a lamb. Daniel became their punching bag. He was beaten, slapped, his hair pulled. It was constant. They stole his inedible food and shoved his face against the filthy floor. Well, if it isn't the famous Sarah Thompson's husband. How'd a big shot like you end up in a place like this? He's just some nobody who got lucky. Looks like his luck ran out. Don't take it personally, Mr. Patterson. We're just following orders. Ms. Thompson herself sent word that we should help you remember your lesson. Daniel clenched his jaw, swallowing the blood that filled his mouth. On the day of his release, he thought the nightmare was finally over. But as he stepped outside the jail, a group of men in dark suits surrounded him, knocked him out, and threw him into a van. When he came to, he was in the middle of a busy downtown street, completely naked. The air was filled with the clicking of cell phone cameras. It took a moment to register, and then he scrambled to his feet, pushing his way through the crowd in a blind panic, stumbling in the direction of home. Every stare from the passers-by felt like a knife, slicing away what little was left of him. His pride, his dignity, every hope he had ever held for the future was crushed into the dirt in that moment, ground into dust. He honestly just wanted to die. By the time he finally made it home and threw on some clothes, a new headline was already at the top of every news site. Husband of heiress has public breakdown over alleged affair. Streaks through downtown. The comments were flooding in hundreds per second. The vitriol was so intense, Daniel couldn't bring himself to read a single one. He wrapped a robe tightly around his trembling body, tears streaming down his face, soaking the fabric. He knew Caleb Vaughn was the only one cruel enough to do something like this, and he knew Sarah must have allowed it. He couldn't stand to be in this city for another second. He hired a courier to pick up the finalized divorce certificate from the courthouse and booked a one-way flight for that same evening. He threw his few belongings into a bag, feeling even more broken and pathetic than the first time he'd been forced to leave. As he was walking out the door, a maid hurried over, holding out a phone. "Sir, Ms. Thompson is on the line for you." From the other end of the call, he could hear the faint sound of chatter. "See, Daniel causes all that trouble, and Sarah can't even stand to have him locked up for 2 days. She really does have a soft spot for him. He might be as bland as a glass of water, but even when you're out drinking fine wine, you eventually need to come home for something to settle your stomach. Right, Sarah?" He heard Sarah laugh and scold. "Don't be ridiculous," before her voice came through the phone, warm and gentle. "Daniel, are you home? Why weren't you answering my calls? I had my team scrub all that nonsense from the internet. I'm coming home tonight. There's something I want to talk to you about in person. Will you wait for me?" Daniel's face was a deathly gray, making his bloodshot eyes stand out even more. The look in them held not a single trace of the love he once had for Sarah. He spoke softly to the maid. "Tell her I'm never coming back." His words traveled through the phone and were swallowed by the noise of the party on the other end, disappearing as quickly as a snowflake melting on the surface of a lake. Sarah didn't quite catch what he said, but a strange sense of unease crept over her. She frowned, her hand tightening on her phone. "Daniel? What was that? The connection is bad. I couldn't hear you." She pressed the phone closer to her ear, but all she heard was a dial tone. He had hung up. Sarah looked down at her screen, where the contact name, Daniel, was still glowing. A strange, unidentifiable panic began to crawl up her spine. "Sarah, what are you staring at?" One of her friends nudged her with an elbow, a drink in her hand. "I was just on the phone with Caleb. He knows you're here and said he's on his way over." Normally, the name Caleb Vaughn might have brought a small smile to her face. But today, she irritably pushed her friend's arm away. "Who told him where I was?" she asked, her voice sharp. Her friend was taken aback by her sudden hostility, her glass hovering in midair. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Then, seeing Sarah grab her coat, she seemed to understand. "Oh, rushing home to smooth things over with Daniel? I get it. He made a huge scene with the streaking and the headlines." He probably needs some comforting. Then again, Caleb only did it for your sake, to teach Daniel a lesson, so he stops taking your kindness for granted. That's enough. Sarah's voice was suddenly so loud that several people nearby turned to look. She remembered the pictures she'd seen online of Daniel. His disheveled hair, his pale face, his tear-filled, bloodshot eyes. The image was suddenly crystal clear in her mind, and a dull ache started in her chest. I said he could teach him a lesson, but I never told him to strip Daniel naked and leave him on a public street. Her own anger surprised her. Her friend was speechless and didn't dare say another word. Sarah grabbed her coat and hurried out, a new worry taking root. Maybe she had gone too far this time. On the way home, she stopped by Daniel's favorite little noodle shop and picked up an order of the beef noodle soup he loved. She also had her assistant drop off several new limited edition watches, the keys to a new sports car, and a huge bouquet of white roses. Daniel was nothing like Caleb. He hated flashy gestures. Gazing at the pile of gifts in her back seat, Sarah felt her anxiety begin to subside. She was sure of it. Once he saw all this, Daniel would forgive her. She knew him so well. He had no one else. He had to rely on her. A single payment had been enough to make him disappear quietly the first time, and he had come crawling back the moment she'd called. All she had to do was offer him a few treats, swallow her pride, say a few sweet things, and he would melt. He loved her too much. He would never really leave her over something so trivial. Brimming with anticipation, Sarah hurried back to the Thompson estate. But as she pulled up, she frowned. The house was completely dark. In the past, no matter how late she came home, Daniel would always leave a light on in the living room and have a glass of warm milk waiting for her. He would greet her with a smile and pull her into a hug. But tonight, the entire ground floor was shrouded in darkness. She stepped into the foyer and flipped on the lights. "Daniel, I'm home," she called out. Her voice echoed in the silent house, unanswered. Sarah set down the gifts and hurried to the master bedroom. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open to find the room dark and empty. She reached out and touched the bed. The sheets were cold, undisturbed. She walked to the closet. All the expensive clothes and watches she had bought for him were still there. On the balcony, the little succulent he cared for was still sitting in its pot, but there was no sign of him anywhere. A cold night wind gusted through an open window, and Sarah suddenly shivered. She stood there for a moment, stunned, and then she laughed. Of course, Daniel was still angry that she hadn't taken his side, so he was trying to scare her by running away. After all, he had no family in Chicago and barely any friends. If she hadn't sent people to find him after he left the first time, he probably would have starved. Now, after his public humiliation, he had nothing. Where else could he possibly go but back to her? He was probably hiding out in some hotel, just waiting for her to come find him. Suddenly, she heard a sound from the entryway, the click of the front door unlocking. Her heart leaped. She ran down the stairs from the bedroom. "Daniel, you're back. I bought you." Her words died in her throat. Standing in the doorway wasn't Daniel. It was Caleb Vaughn. Caleb stood in the entryway, dressed in a sharp red suit. Their eyes met, and he clearly saw the look on her face shift from eager anticipation to crushing disappointment. Why was she looking at him like that? Pushing down a flicker of confusion and panic, he plastered a confident smirk on his face and strode into the living room. His eyes swept over the mountain of gifts before finally landing on the bowl of noodle soup. "This stuff is from that greasy little dive, isn't it? Only a poor, uncultured loser like Daniel would eat that garbage." He picked up the bouquet of white roses, wrinkling his nose in disgust as he moved to toss them in the trash. "White roses are for funerals. You know I only like red roses. Have you forgotten?" Sarah's expression hardened. She snatched the flowers from his hand and carefully set them back down. "They're not for you," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth and indulgence. "Not for you? Then who, Daniel?" Caleb laughed as if it were the funniest thing he had ever heard, crossing his arms over his chest. "Sarah, are you insane? The entire city has seen him naked. He's a laughingstock, a complete waste of space, and you're still treating him like he's some kind of prize?" He reached into his designer bag, pulled out a piece of paper, and threw it in her face. It was a receipt. "You think he's so innocent? Look at this." He ordered a bunch of baby supplies behind her back, and then had the order canceled and destroyed. Sarah frowned, her eyes fixed on the receipt. Daniel's name was printed on it, clear and sharp. Then she saw the cancellation date. It was the same day she had run into him at the hospital. Her breath caught in her throat. It felt as if a giant hand had closed around her heart, squeezing so tightly she couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" she managed, her voice a raw whisper. Seeing her reaction, Caleb's smile widened. "What do you think it means?" He obviously knocked up some other woman and panicked. He ordered the stuff, then got rid of it before you could find out. Think about it. Who knows what kind of trash he was sleeping with during those 3 years he was gone. He only came back because you're the head of the Thompson family now. He's just here for the money. Shut up. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with a fury so intense it could have burned him to ash. She knew Daniel better than anyone. He wasn't that kind of person. He had been devoted to her since he was 16. He was painfully old-fashioned. For him, there had never been anyone else. Even during the 3 years apart, he had just worked a simple delivery job in some small town. He hadn't even made any female friends. Caleb was taken aback by her ferocity, but refused to back down. Am I wrong? Then why didn't he tell you about it? Why order it and then cancel it in secret? He's been playing you this whole time, Sarah, with his pathetic sad sack act. Sarah ignored him, her mind racing. She saw Daniel in her office, holding those papers, looking like he had something to say, but couldn't get the words out. She saw him at the hospital, pale and injured. He had been ready. He had wanted to have a child with her. And she had been completely oblivious, hurting him, ignoring him, time and again, all for Caleb. A horrifying realization dawned on her. This time, Daniel was really leaving. He wasn't just angry. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was gone, and he was never coming back. The sound of urgent footsteps came from the top of the stairs. A maid came running down, hesitating before she spoke. "Mom, I found this in a drawer in the study. It had both your and Mr. Patterson's names on it, so I brought it right away." At the mention of Daniel's name, Sarah spun around. She froze when she saw what the maid was holding. It was a small booklet, a shocking shade of red that made the air leave her lungs. It was the finalized divorce certificate. Sarah's eyes were glued to the document. Her proud, straight posture seemed to collapse in on itself, as if her very soul had been ripped out, leaving an empty husk behind. She opened it. Inside was a photo from their wedding day. Daniel was smiling, his expression filled with the same tenderness he'd had then. "No, it's not possible," she whispered. "He loved me. How could he actually divorce me?" She tried to deny it, but Caleb wouldn't let her. "Not possible? He's been planning this for ages. He's probably already lined up your replacement." Sarah's head snapped up to look at him, and the raw fury in her eyes was so unfamiliar that it made Caleb take an involuntary step back. Ignoring him, she turned and ran back to the bedroom like a woman possessed. She remembered that when Daniel first moved in, he'd had only one small, battered beige suitcase. It held everything he owned in the world, a few well-worn books he'd saved for years, and a couple of changes of old clothes. She had laughed at him then, calling him provincial, telling him that what was hers was his, and that he didn't need to cling to his cheap, worthless junk anymore. But now, as she frantically searched the bedroom, she found that everything she had ever given him was still there. The expensive watches, the designer clothes, all neatly in place, some with the tags still on. But the small, battered beige suitcase was gone. Sarah's heart plummeted. He had taken everything that was his to begin with, and left behind everything she had given him. He wasn't just leaving. He was erasing her completely, leaving nothing behind to remember him by. She sank to the floor, exhausted. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and dialed Daniel's number one more time. A cold, robotic voice answered. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." For a moment, she thought she must have misheard. She stubbornly dialed again and heard the same clear message. She opened her iMessage to the pinned conversation with Daniel and typed and deleted message after message. Finally, she sent just one. "Daniel, where are you?" She just needed to see him. The rest could be said in person. But the moment she hit send, a notification appeared. Message failed to send. "This person has blocked your number." She forced herself to take a breath and called her assistant. "Find Daniel Patterson. I don't care what it takes. Tear this city apart. If he's left the country, find him and bring him back." On the other end of the line, her assistant nervously agreed. But it wasn't enough. She couldn't just sit and wait. She had to find him herself. She shot to her feet and hurried downstairs, only to find the living room full of people. Caleb had apparently called for reinforcements. His grandfather, the patriarch of the Vaughn family, was sitting there alongside several of the senior Thompson family elders, all of them looking grim. "Sarah, stop right there," Caleb's grandfather said, his voice sharp. "Look at this mess. Where do you think you're going?" He thumped his cane on the floor. Caleb's private photos are all over the city. You've made him a laughingstock. How is he supposed to show his face in public? For the first time ever, Grandma Thompson looked at her with pure disappointment. You and Caleb were married. You threw that away because you claimed you were in love with Daniel. Now you've made a mockery of all of us, having children with Caleb while married to another man. Sarah, what have you done? Caleb, holding one of the children, sat beside his grandfather, his eyes red-rimmed. Grandpa, Daniel was jealous. He leaked our private photos, and he's been cheating on Sarah with some other woman. He even had a baby with her, and Sarah still chooses him over me. She doesn't care how I feel at all. What are you talking about? Sarah yelled. Daniel would never do that. Oh, really? Then why did he run away? Why won't he face you? Caleb shot back. Caleb flinched at her tone, and a fresh wave of anger and resentment washed over him. His hands clenched the arm of the sofa, his nails digging into the leather. That bastard Daniel. Even after he was gone, he was still finding ways to ruin his life. He couldn't lose to him. He wouldn't. A calculating look entered his eyes. I don't care. He's ruined my reputation. You have to remarry me. If you don't, I'll get rid of this child right now. He made a move as if to actually discard the baby in his arms. Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose, her mind a storm of frustration and anger. But she didn't leave the room. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, spring carried the scent of rain and warm earth. The afternoon sun filtered through a large glass window, illuminating the simple wooden sign of a flower shop called the Petal Patch. Inside, Daniel was carefully arranging a fresh delivery of Lisianthus flowers. A month earlier, Daniel had arrived in the small town of Willow Creek. The first thing he did was change his name to Ash. The flower shop had become his sanctuary. There were no rumors here, no whispers from Chicago, no shadow of Sarah Thompson. The people in Willow Creek just smiled and said hello, complimenting his arrangements. No one asked about his past, and no one gave him a second glance. The peace was a rare gift, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could finally breathe. The pale purple petals were still cool with morning dew, and the sensation on his fingertips made him pause. Sarah had given him a bouquet of the very same flowers once, back when her eyes were still filled with what he had thought was love. In that brief moment of distraction, his finger was pricked by a thorn hidden on a stem. A bead of blood welled up and trickled down his skin. He barely winced, simply pulling a tissue from his apron pocket to press against the cut before quickly getting back to arranging the flowers in their buckets. The water reflected his profile. He still looked a little pale, but his movements were efficient. The town baker had ordered 50 bouquets for a grand opening later that day, and he needed to get them ready. He wanted to get as much done as possible before Grace Miller got back from her delivery run to the next town over. Otherwise, she would insist on doing it all herself. Why aren't you wearing gloves? A gentle voice came from the doorway. Daniel looked up to see Grace walking quickly toward him. She had just returned from her delivery, and her eyes immediately fell on the cut on his finger. She quickly found some antiseptic and a bandage. Grace took his hand, her movements slow and gentle as she carefully cleaned the small cut. You're still recovering? You shouldn't be pushing yourself so hard. You could have waited for me to get back. She murmured as she wrapped the bandage around his finger. It's only 50 bouquets. We can stay a little late and get them done tonight. Daniel watched the careful concentration on her face and felt a gentle warmth spread through his chest. Grace was always like this. Even though she ran her own nursery, she always found time to help him at the shop. Knowing he was prone to small cuts, she had even replaced all the sharp-tipped shears with rounded ones. The customer needs them soon, Daniel said quietly, pulling his hand back to get back to work. You're busy at your nursery. You don't have to keep coming over to help me. But Grace didn't move. Instead, she picked up some wrapping paper and began skillfully arranging the flowers. I have people watching the nursery. You're the one who needs to take it easy. She paused, her voice softening. Ash, you don't have to work yourself to the bone. It's okay to rest. You're safe here now. Daniel's hand stilled, his touch on the petals suddenly lighter. He knew Grace meant well, but work was the only thing that kept the nightmares at bay, the only thing that stopped his mind from drifting back to Sarah. He was terrified of remembering the freezing pool of the nights in that jail cell. He was afraid that if he stopped for even a moment, he would be dragged right back into that hell. Busyness was his only defense. If he was busy, he didn't have time to think. I'm fine, he said, forcing a small smile. He held up a finished bouquet. What do you think of this color combination? Grace knew Ash had a past he didn't want to talk about. He always tried to smile, but she could see the bone-deep exhaustion in his eyes. She didn't press him for details. She just took the bouquet from his hand and gently guided him to a chair. "I'll finish these. You rest for a bit." Daniel sat quietly in the wicker chair outside the shop. The sun was warm on his skin, so comfortable he could have fallen asleep right there. He looked down at the pastry bag in his hands, at the cute little logo printed on it, and inhaled the sweet, weedy scent. For a moment, it all felt like a dream. It was so warm and peaceful that he almost forgot about the world outside Willow Creek, the world that had left him battered and broken. He almost forgot the day he'd arrived, lost and dragging his old suitcase through the unfamiliar streets in a downpour. Weak from his ordeal, he had collapsed on the side of the road. He woke up in a small cabin on Grace's nursery grounds. He'd been afraid to even speak at first, terrified of revealing his past, but Grace never asked. She just quietly took care of him. She had an uncanny ability to notice when he was distressed. Once, when he flinched at the sight of shellfish on a menu, he later discovered she had quietly thrown out all the shrimp and crab in her own freezer. When he decided to open his flower shop, she planted rows of his favorite white roses at her nursery just so she could supply him. Knowing he was afraid of the dark, she would always swing by the shop after her last delivery of the day and wait with him until he closed up, not leaving until she saw him safely inside his apartment. "What are you thinking about?" Grace's voice broke his reverie. She handed him a cup of hot chocolate. "There's a meteor shower tonight. The whole town is going up to the ridge to watch. Do you want to come?" Daniel looked up at her. The streetlight caught her eyes, making them sparkle. He nodded. Deep inside him, a place that had been frozen for a very long time began to thaw. A little after 9, Grace drove them up to the ridge overlooking the town. The wind was a bit sharp, so she had brought a thick blanket and wrapped it snugly around his shoulders. Before long, the first meteor streaked across the night, a fleeting silver scar against the black velvet sky. Daniel held his breath, his eyes tracing the meteor's path until it vanished, his heart giving a little flutter. "Quick, make a wish," Grace said with a smile, her voice full of excitement. Daniel stared at the spot where the meteor had disappeared, but he couldn't think of anything to wish for. He had once wished for Sarah to love him longer. He had wished for them to have a child. All of those wishes had turned to dust. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard Grace's voice next to him, full of a quiet sincerity he had never heard before. "I wish," she said, "that Ash will have a peaceful and happy life from now on, and that he will never have to suffer again." Daniel looked at her, and his eyes began to burn. In all these years, no one had ever made a wish for him. Not a wish for him to go away, not a wish to make up for some past wrong. Just a simple, selfless wish for his happiness. He sniffled. "Thank you," he whispered. After the meteor shower, they slowly walked back toward town. On the way, Daniel overheard a few other tourists talking. "Did you hear? The head of the Thompson family in Chicago is being forced to remarry Caleb Vaughn. I heard their second kid's 1-month party is next week." "The Thompsons? Isn't she the one from that leaked photo scandal? I thought she had another husband. What happened to him? He just disappeared. Who knows with those rich families? It's always a mess." Daniel's steps faltered for just a second before he started walking again. Of course Sarah would end up with Caleb. They were from the same world, a perfect match. It was for the best. This way, the break between them was clean and final. "No lingering, Thais." Grace must have noticed his change in mood, because she gently took his hand. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath, pushing down the sudden turmoil in his chest. He shook his head. "It's nothing," he said, his voice steady. "Just remembered something. Something that doesn't matter anymore. Let's go home." Ever since the confrontation with the elders, Caleb had moved into the Thompson estate, using taking care of the children as his excuse to stay. He spent every day finding new ways to cause trouble. He'd throw his bowl if his breakfast wasn't to his liking. If he caught a maid putting away any of Daniel's old belongings, he would fly into a rage and smash them. "This is my house now. Why is that trashy stuff still here?" He would wake Sarah in the middle of the night, claiming one of the children was sick, forcing her to drop everything and rush home. If she showed the slightest bit of impatience, he would threaten to kill himself and take the children with him. One evening, Sarah came home from the office to find Caleb ordering a maid to throw out the little succulent Daniel had kept. "Caleb!" Sarah's voice was ice. She struggled to keep her anger in check. "Haven't you had enough?" Caleb turned slowly, a smug look on his face. "Enough? I'm just getting rid of things that don't belong here. Don't forget, Sarah, we have 2 children together. This is my house now. He stepped toward her, reaching for her arm, but she pulled away in disgust. I told you not to touch me. Her voice was filled with unconcealed weariness. Do you really think these children are enough to keep me tied to you? Caleb stared at her, his eyes filling with tears. What are you saying? Are you disowning our children? I'm warning you. Sarah, if you're not good to me, I'll get rid of them both. I'll make sure the Thompson family line ends with you. His words were the final spark, igniting days of pent-up rage. She grabbed his wrist, her grip like steel. In the family line? Caleb, you really need to get over yourself. The only reason I put up with you this long is because of the Vaughn family name. Do you want to know why I divorced you in the first place? It's because your spoiled, vicious personality is only good for one thing, a short-term affair. Her eyes scanned his suddenly pale face, her words twisting like a knife. You don't have a fraction of Daniel's kindness. He would never use such cheap threats against me. He would never, ever use a child as a weapon. Caleb's eyes widened in disbelief. You're comparing me to him? To that nobody? Sarah, if you hadn't married me, if you hadn't had the Vaughn family backing you, you never would have taken control of the Thompson Corporation so easily. How dare you speak to me like that? He was nearly hysterical, but Sarah was done with him. She shoved him away and walked out of the room. At the door, she stopped and turned, her voice like ice. You have 30 minutes to pack your things and leave this house. Caleb stared after her in disbelief, sure she was just bluffing. But half an hour later, he found all his belongings dumped on the front lawn. Who told you you could touch my things? He screamed, lunging at a nearby maid. But he was immediately restrained by security. The staff had long grown tired of Caleb's tantrums. He had been nothing but a nightmare since he arrived, so different from Mr. Patterson, who had always been so kind and considerate. And now, with a direct order from Sarah, the head of staff felt emboldened. Mr. Vaughn, Ms. Thompson's orders were to call security if you refused to leave. Caleb stomped his foot in a rage. Fine, Sada. He slammed the door, got in his car, and drove straight to the old apartment building where she and Daniel had lived together years ago. After she and Daniel had gotten back together, Sarah had bought the entire building as a sort of monument to their relationship. Now, it was a monument Caleb couldn't stand to look at. He had his men break down the apartment door. Staring at an old photo of Daniel on the wall, his face twisted in a hateful sneer. Why? Why does she still care about you, even after you're gone? He pulled a lighter from his pocket and set fire to the curtains. The flames leaped up instantly, greedily consuming the old wooden furniture as thick, black smoke filled the room. Burn it all, he shrieked, backing out of the apartment. He stood on the street below, watching the flames lick at the windows, a satisfied smile on his face. Half an hour later, Sarah got a call from the fire department. By the time she arrived, the apartment was almost completely gutted. Staring at the flames, she made a call to her assistant. Terminate all of our contracts with the Vaughn Corporation. Effective immediately. The order went out immediately, and within 10 minutes, word had reached Caleb. He was stunned. To get back at him, Sarah was willing to tank a dozen profitable, long-term deals between their two companies. She was trying to completely humiliate him. Choking on his rage, he sent a message to Sarah. Tell her if she's not here in an hour, I'm getting rid of the children and she'll never see them again. Then he sat back, fuming, and waited. It wasn't long before Sarah arrived. Seeing her, Caleb let out a smug little laugh. I knew you'd come. You call me a short-term affair. Can a short-term affair give you an heir? If you don't agree to remarry me today, I swear I'll get rid of them. Don't you dare come crying to me when it's done. Sarah looked at his childish, unreasonable face, and the last of her patience evaporated. She couldn't understand what she had ever seen in this spoiled, vicious man. How had she ever betrayed Daniel for him? She watched him calmly until his tantrum subsided. Go ahead, she said. No one's stopping you. Caleb froze, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. What did you say? I said, do whatever you want. Sarah turned to her bodyguards. Since he's so determined to get rid of the children, have them sent out of Chicago. The Thompson family will take full responsibility for their care from now on. No, you can't do this to our children. Caleb screamed, lunging for her, but the bodyguards held him back. As he watched her walk away without a backward glance, he finally broke down completely. You'll regret this, Sarah. They're Thompson heirs. Your family will never forgive you for this. Sarah had given the order, and the bodyguards moved quickly, forcibly taking the children from Caleb's arms. The sound of his frantic screaming behind her made her falter for a second. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, an image of Daniel on the phone, canceling his order for baby supplies, flashing in her mind. He must have been in so much pain then. He must hate her so much. Ms. Thompson, we found something. It's about Mr. Vaughn. Her assistant's voice pulled Sarah from her thoughts. She took the file from her assistant. Inside was a thick stack of photographs. She froze. The pictures were graphic, showing Caleb with a variety of different women in hotel rooms and clubs, naked and tangled together. She gripped the photos so tightly her knuckles turned white. He dared to cheat on me, but as the anger rose, another, stranger feeling came with it. Relief. She was relieved. Now she had a reason, a way out. She drove straight back to the Vaughn estate. Caleb's clothes were still in disarray from his earlier struggle. When he saw her, he was about to start playing the victim again, but she slapped him hard across the face. You dare cheat on me? Her eyes were like chips of ice. She slapped him again, harder this time. You sleep around with those models. Then you use our children to threaten me. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? A bright red handprint bloomed on his cheek. He finally snapped, his voice a hysterical shriek. So what if I did? Did you really think I wanted to marry you? I just wanted to settle down, and you were a convenient, attractive trophy wife. She had what she needed. Sarah turned off the voice recorder on her phone and shoved him away. Caleb stumbled backward, the pain making his face twist into an ugly sneer. Sarah didn't give him a second glance as she turned and walked away. As soon as she was in her car, she called her assistant. Put every resource we have on it. I don't care where in the world he is. Find Daniel. And release the photos and that recording to every news outlet. Let the world see what a shameless pig the Vaughns raised. Let's see them try and force a marriage now. She hung up and stared out the window at the snow that had begun to fall, her eyes burning. It was so cold. Was Daniel somewhere cold right now? Was he safe? And would he ever? Could he ever forgive her? Sarah didn't know the answer. All she could do was go home, lock herself in her bedroom, and hug the pillow Daniel used to sleep on. It still smelled faintly of his soap, and the familiar scent was the only thing that could soothe the frantic, aching bitterness in her heart. Drifting in a restless sleep, she was startled awake by her phone. She snatched it up, her voice a hoarse croak. Did you find him? We've confirmed he entered New Zealand. We've checked all the major cities, but we don't have a specific address yet. Her assistant's voice dropped to a whisper. And it seems he's using a new identity, which is making it much more difficult. Sarah was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, delegate my responsibilities at the company. Book me the next flight to New Zealand. I'll find him myself. Sarah arrived in New Zealand the next day. For a month, she searched relentlessly, turning the city upside down, but found no trace of him. Late one night, in her penthouse suite, she sat by the window, staring at a photo of Daniel. The half-empty bottle of whiskey tilted in her hand. A cold wind blew in from the open window, making her shiver. Her vision blurred, and in her mind's eye, she saw him. She saw a 16-year-old Daniel in a crisp white shirt, stopping her after school. His face flushed as he handed her a love letter. Sarah, I've liked you for a long time. The image shifted, and she saw him in the freezing pool, struggling for air, his face streaked with tears. Sarah, why are you doing this to me? He cried. It had meant nothing to her then. Now, the memory was agony. Daniel, I'm so sorry. Please don't go. She woke with a start, muttering his name, tears and spilled whiskey streaking her face. And in that moment, she finally understood. He wasn't missing. He was hiding. He was doing everything he could to get away from her. She didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, her grandmother called. Sarah, she said, her voice punctuated by a cough, I know you're looking for that boy, but you made a terrible mistake. And now look at you. Are you just going to throw away the company, too? Mom, we can't have a Thompson abandoning her duties for some man. Her uncle's voice cut in, agitated. Sarah used to be brilliant, but now she's going to run the company into the ground. He had been after her position for years, and now he finally had his chance to make a move. Sarah was exhausted. She knew her grandmother loved her, but the Thompson Corporation was her grandmother's entire life's work. She would never let Sarah's personal drama jeopardize it. But she couldn't stop looking for Daniel. She just couldn't. Just then, she glanced up, and through the window of a shop across the street, she saw a familiar silhouette. Her heart began to pound her chest. She sprinted across the street, and just as she reached the door of the shop, the man inside turned his head. It was Daniel. But her relief was instantly replaced by a cold dread when she saw the woman standing next to him. She was tall and slim, her head tilted back slightly as Daniel fastened a necklace around her neck. He looked down, his fingers gentle as he worked the clasp. The woman said something, and a faint blush rose on Daniel's cheeks as he broke into a wide, genuine smile. Sarah couldn't remember the last time she had seen him smile like that. After the necklace was on, he reached out to adjust it, his knuckles brushing her cheek. The woman leaned into his touch, a small, intimate gesture that felt completely natural. A hot, furious jealousy surged through Sarah. He had learned how to fasten a necklace for her. The first time he tried, his fingers had fumbled with the clasp for what felt like an eternity. She had taken his hands in hers and patiently guided him through it. And now he was using that skill, that gesture, for another woman. And he was smiling. A wave of pure rage washed over her, and she stormed into the shop. The only reason Daniel was there was to pick out a birthday gift for Grace. It was an overcast day, and the flower shop was quiet. After the last customer left, he stood behind the counter, scrolling through his phone. The screen was filled with gift ideas, but after half an hour of searching, he still hadn't found the right one. Grace's birthday was in a few days, and he wanted to get her something special. She had done so much for him since he'd arrived in New Zealand. He wanted to get her a proper gift, but Grace didn't seem to need anything. "What's on your mind? You've been a million miles away all day." Grace's truck pulled up, and she began unloading crates of freshly cut flowers. After carrying in the last of the flowers, she walked over to the counter and handed him a small bundle of white roses. "We had a few extra," she said. Daniel looked down, a little embarrassed. She always said that, but he wasn't a fool. There couldn't possibly be extra roses every single day. Just before she left, he put down his phone and called out to her. I was trying to find a birthday present for you, but I have no idea what you'd like." Grace blinked, and then her usually placid face broke into a rare, wide smile. "Well, if it's that much trouble, why don't we go pick something out together? Everyone at the nursery is busy today, so I can sneak away for a bit." Since she'd offered, Daniel had no reason to refuse, so he quickly agreed. He closed the shop for the afternoon and followed Grace into the main shopping district. The street was bustling with life, a busker playing guitar on the corner, a group of children clamoring around an ice cream cart. After browsing in a few different shops, they ended up in a small, independent boutique. He'd only taken 2 steps inside when a necklace in a display case caught his eye. It was a delicate silver chain with a small star and crescent moon charm. It would look perfect on Grace. She was always wearing simple, elegant dresses, and the necklace would be the perfect accent. "That one is lovely, sir. You're welcome to have your girlfriend try it on," the sales clerk said, approaching them. Daniel froze, about to correct her, but Grace was already turning to him, her head tilted. "How did you know? I was just looking at that one myself." She gave him a small, shy smile. "I'm terrible at putting on necklaces. It always takes me forever in front of a mirror. Could you help me with it?" Her words were a warm breath against his chest, and he suddenly felt his face flush, his heart starting to beat a little faster. He took the necklace from the clerk, trying to calm the sudden fluttering in his chest. He managed to fasten the clasp, and was just about to step back to see how it looked, when a woman's voice shouted from the doorway. "Daniel!" His hands froze, his entire body going rigid. He turned slowly. Standing in the doorway, not 10 feet away, was Sarah. The wind was whipping her hair around her face, and her eyes, those proud, imperious eyes, were bloodshot and bruised with exhaustion. Before he could even react, Sarah had stormed into the shop and shoved Grace aside. Her eyes were red-rimmed and furious as she stared at Daniel. "You found someone else this fast? How dare you? I swear to God, Daniel, I'll have this woman's hands cut off." Grace didn't seem angry. She simply stepped between them. "Ma'am, please calm down. Ash is my friend. You're upsetting him." "Friend?" Sarah let out a harsh, disbelieving laugh, her eyes filled with a hurt and furious betrayal, locking onto Daniel's. "Daniel, you promised me. You promised you would never leave me again. Why are you with her? Have you forgotten everything? You said you would love me forever." Her frantic questions washed over him, leaving him feeling nothing but tired. Her voice was just noise. He gently removed her hand from his arm and moved to stand beside Grace. "Sarah, we're divorced, and my name is Ash now. Who I'm with is none of your business." Sarah looked at the two of them standing together, and a fresh wave of rage threatened to consume her. She wanted to run over and drag Daniel away, to scream at him, to ask him how he could be so cruel, to tell him how much she had suffered for the past few months. But then she saw the color in his cheeks, saw that the haunted, desperate look was gone from his eyes, and the knot of anxiety that she had carried for months loosened, just a little. At least he was okay. He wasn't cold. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't shivering in some filthy alley like he was in her dreams. He seemed different now, away from her. When she looked up and met his guarded, wary gaze, she froze. She couldn't bear to make him hate her any more than he already did. She was terrified of his disgust. She watched them pay for the necklace and leave the store, then followed them from a safe distance, all the way to a small flower shop. That night, Sarah sat for hours in a cafe across the street, just watching. Late that night, she watched as Grace walked Daniel home after closing the shop. The jealousy was so intense it was like a physical pain, but she forced herself to stay put, repeating over and over that she couldn't risk pushing him even further away. The next morning, at the crack of dawn, Sarah was back at the flower shop. Daniel wasn't there, but Grace was inside, arranging flowers. Sarah pushed open the door and slapped a check down on the counter. The number on the check had an impressive number of zeros after it, enough to buy a mansion. "That's $10 million, Sarah said, looking down her nose at Grace, who was kneeling on the floor arranging flowers. Her voice was full of its old arrogance. "I want you to leave Daniel, disappear from his life, and never see him again. That should be more than enough to keep you comfortable for the rest of your life." Grace looked up, her eyes glancing briefly at the check before moving to Sarah's face. She didn't say a word. After a moment, she picked up the check and, holding Sarah's gaze, slowly and deliberately tore it into tiny pieces, letting them flutter to the floor. "Miss Thompson, what's between Ash and me can't be measured in dollars. I care for him because he deserves to be cared for, not for his money. If you really have his best interests at heart, you'll respect his choices and stop harassing him." "You," Sarah, stunned by her refusal, lunged for her, but a hand caught her wrist, stopping her. The grip wasn't strong, but stopped her cold. It was Daniel. He looked from the torn pieces of the check on the floor to Sarah's face, a look of weary disbelief in his eyes. "Sarah, do you really think everyone is like you? That money is the only thing that matters? Did you really think I took your parting gift all those years ago because I was greedy?" He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I didn't leave because of the money. I left because I finally realized that you never loved me. I was done lying to myself. I would rather leave than stay and watch you with Caleb. I would have left even without the money. Do you understand that?" With every word, the color drained from Sarah's face. She forced a pathetic smile. "No, Daniel, that's not true. I do love you. I made mistakes, I know I did, but I can change. We can go back home. Just give me one more chance. Please." Daniel cut her off. "I didn't even mind when you left me for your arranged marriage. I loved you, so I told myself you had no choice. But then you came back, and you lied to me. You were sleeping with him the whole time. The love I had for you died that day." Sarah started to move toward him, to try and explain, but he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sharp sound echoed in the quiet little shop. He was exhausted, his voice barely a whisper. "If you have any decency left in you at all, you will leave me alone. I have a good life now. I have a shop. I have new friends. I have a new life. Please just leave me alone." Sarah left. She told herself over and over that he just needed time. He would come around. But then her grandmother called with an ultimatum. Come home and take care of business, or she would be cut off, her inheritance revoked. After a long, sleepless night, she flew back to Chicago. The atmosphere in the Thompson Corporation boardroom was tense. Sarah sat at the head of the table, her face etched with exhaustion, and looked out at the assembled board members. "I will not be moving forward with my uncle's proposal," she announced. Her uncle, Robert Thompson, slammed his hand on the table. "You've been gone for months, chasing after that boy, and the first thing you do when you get back is shoot down my proposal? You're going to run this company into the ground. Anyone who would abandon their responsibilities for a man isn't fit to run this company. You should step down now, before you do any more damage." For 3 sleepless days and nights, Sarah calmly and methodically dealt with her uncle's attempted coup, dismantling his every move. But at the casual, dismissive mention of Daniel's name, something in her snapped. She swept everything off the massive mahogany table, sending papers and glasses crashing to the floor. She glared at her uncle, her eyes blazing. "If you ever speak his name again, I will personally throw you out of this family and this company, and you will never be allowed back in." The boardroom was silent. The other board members looked at each other, but no one dared to speak. After stabilizing the company and smoothing things over with her grandmother, Sarah was on the next flight back to New Zealand. The moment her plane landed, she rushed straight to the flower shop. On the way, she stopped and bought an assortment of breakfast pastries. Daniel always used to forget to eat breakfast when he was busy. This time, she would be patient. She would work her way back into his life, little by little. She pushed open the door to the shop, the little bell above it chiming. She set the bag of pastries on the counter and greeted him with a warm smile, as if nothing had ever happened. "Daniel, I brought you some breakfast." He had been humming to himself, but the moment he saw her, his smile vanished. "You're not welcome here," he said, his voice flat. Sarah didn't move. "I know you're still angry, but you know you get an upset stomach if you don't eat." "Please," she said, her voice soft and pleading. "Just let this be my way of apologizing. Please." Daniel didn't take the bag. He didn't even look at her again. He simply went back to his work, treating her as if she wasn't there. Sarah could do nothing but stand there and watch him until the pastries in the bag had gone cold. He walked past her with an armload of flowers, muttering that she was in his way, and she finally, reluctantly, left. But for the next several days, she came back. Every morning at 8, she would arrive with breakfast, and every morning, Daniel would throw it in the trash as soon as she left. Still, she persisted. She started buying out all of his stock for the day. Dozens of bouquets of lisianthus, hundreds of white roses. She thought if he sold out early, he might go home and rest. A week later, Sarah walked into the shop as usual. Before the clerk could say anything, Daniel came out from the back room. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes calm but weary. "Ms. Thompson, nothing is for sale today." Sarah was taken aback. "The price isn't an issue," she said quickly, assuming he wanted more money. "Name your price, I'll pay it." "It's not about the money," he said. "Flowers are meant for people who will appreciate them, who will cherish them. Not for people who will buy them just to let them wither in a corner and then be thrown out with the trash." Sarah swallowed hard. "I just don't want you to have to work so hard," she said, her voice hoarse and thick with a misery she felt he was refusing to see. "Daniel, please just come home with me. You wouldn't have to do this anymore. You wouldn't have to work at all." "I don't need that," he cut her off. "I'm earning my own money now. I'm doing something I love. I'm happier now than I have ever been." Sarah looked down, hiding the desolate look in her eyes, and left. Daniel watched her go, a sigh of relief escaping his lips. He had a lot of other orders to fill, so he got back to work. As he was finishing a bouquet of white roses, the bell on the door chimed again. He looked up, annoyed. "What do you want now?" He had assumed it was Sarah, returning yet again. He was wrong. It was Caleb Vaughn. Caleb stormed into the shop and lunged at Daniel, grabbing for his collar. His eyes were wild with a frantic, long-simmering hatred. "You son of a bitch. Wasn't it enough to steal her from me once? You had to come back and do it again? Is this what you wanted? To see me ruined?" Daniel instinctively tried to step back, but he bumped into a display stand, a sharp pain shooting through his lower back. He looked at the flowers that had scattered across the floor. It just wasn't his day. He'd just gotten rid of Sarah, and now he had to deal with Caleb. Something was wrong with Caleb. He'd lost his usual arrogant swagger. He seemed unhinged. As Caleb lunged for him again, another figure appeared, grabbing Caleb's wrist and shoving him back. It was Sarah. She moved to stand in front of Daniel, checking to make sure he was all right before turning on Caleb and pushing him out of the shop. "This is a place of business, not your personal playground. You're still protecting him?" Caleb shrieked. A red mark was already forming on his wrist, but Caleb didn't seem to notice. He just laughed, a wild, unhinged sound that quickly turned into a sob. "You sent our children away for him. You leaked those photos, that recording to everyone. The Vaughn family is ruined because of me. Our partners have pulled out. Our stock has plummeted. My father is in the hospital. My mother won't stop crying." His eyes, wild and hateful, found Daniel, who had followed them out onto the street. "This is all because of you." Sarah frowned, instinctively moving to shield Daniel from him. "It has nothing to do with him," she said, her voice firm. "I did all of it. I sent the children away. I leaked the photos. I terminated the contracts. If you're angry with someone, be angry with me. Leave him out of it." "Be angry with you?" Caleb repeated, a strange, manic look on his face. He seemed to have forgotten he was crying, his face twisting into a mask of pure jealousy. "You only see him now. I'm nothing to you. I was with you when you were nobody. I gave you children, and you throw me away for him? You've ruined me. If I'm going down, I'm taking you both with me." Before they could react, he had spun around and was sprinting toward his car parked at the curb. He threw open the door, started the engine, and swerved violently, aiming the car directly at Daniel. "Look out!" Sarah screamed, her heart seizing in her chest. There was no time to think. She acted on pure instinct, shoving Daniel hard out of the car's path. The force of her push sent Daniel stumbling onto the safety of the sidewalk. But Sarah was hit head-on. The impact sent her flying, like a broken doll, and she landed in a heap on the pavement nearly 30 feet away. Blood bloomed across her white shirt, staining Daniel's entire world red. He struggled to his feet, his body starting to tremble at the sight of the garish crimson spreading on the pavement. He tried to rush to her side, but Grace, who must have arrived during the chaos, held him back firmly. "Don't go. It's too dangerous," Grace urged. "And we shouldn't move her. We could make the injuries worse." She quickly dialed 911 on her phone before guiding the trembling Daniel to sit on the curb. Sitting in his car, Caleb stared at Sarah's crumpled form on the asphalt, a delayed wave of fear finally washing over him. He had meant to hit Daniel. He never imagined Sarah would throw herself in front of the car to save him. He had hit Sarah. The Thompsons would destroy him for this. Caleb's hands trembled on the steering wheel. He hesitated for a few seconds before panic gave way to self-preservation. He slammed his foot on the accelerator and sped away, his tires kicking up gravel as he fled the scene, leaving chaos in his wake. A crowd was starting to gather. People were pulling out their phones, taking pictures, talking amongst themselves. But Daniel heard none of it. There was just a high-pitched ringing in his ears and the single, horrific image of Sarah being thrown through the air, replaying over and over in his mind. The ambulance arrived, and paramedics pushed through the crowd with a stretcher, carefully loading Sarah inside. Daniel stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching as the vehicle sped away, sirens screaming. As it disappeared from view, the last of his strength gave out, and he collapsed. When he woke again, he was in a hospital. Grace looked at his pale face, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Don't worry," she said softly. "The doctors are doing everything they can for her." Daniel didn't answer, just stared out the window. He did hate Sarah. He hated her for her betrayal, hated her for driving him to his breaking point. But watching her get thrown by that car to save him, his heart was a tangled mess of confusion. He just mumbled, "Okay." After a moment, he pushed back the covers and walked down the hall to the emergency room, where the red-in-use light was glowing ominously. Sarah's assistant saw him and hurried over. The doctor said she has 3 broken ribs and severe internal injuries. They said she won't be able to have children again. It's very critical, and they don't know if she'll wake up. Daniel couldn't find any words. He just stood there outside the doors and waited. Grace stayed with him, a silent, steady presence. They waited for 3 days. On the afternoon of the 4th day, the assistant came running toward them. "Mr. Patterson, she's awake. Miss Thompson is awake." Daniel's heart lurched as he followed the assistant into the hospital room. Sarah lay in the bed, hooked up to a dozen machines, her face pale and her lips cracked. But when she saw him, her eyes lit up. "Daniel, please don't go. I know I was wrong. I was a monster. I shouldn't have betrayed you. I shouldn't have pushed you. I'll never push you again. You can have your flower shop. You can have anything you want. Just please don't leave me." Her voice broke, and she looked like a lost child, her eyes filled with terror and desperate pleading. Daniel looked at her, and though he felt a pang of pity, the overwhelming emotion was exhaustion. He was so tired of the drama, of the pain. All he wanted was a quiet life. He didn't answer her. He just turned, walked out of the room, and dialed Grandma Thompson's number. The moment she picked up, he said quietly, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. Sarah was badly hurt. She was trying to save me." It took a few days for the elderly woman to make the long trip. She went into the room and looked at her frail granddaughter lying in the hospital bed and let out a long, weary sigh, her expression a mixture of pity and exasperation. When she came out and saw Daniel waiting, she spoke. "Daniel, I am so sorry Sarah has dragged you into this. Rest assured, I have already spoken with the Vaughn family. They will handle Caleb, and he will never bother you again. As for Sarah, I will arrange for her care. You don't need to trouble yourself with her any longer." Hearing her words, Daniel felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thank you, Grandma." He knew that with the matriarch's decree, it was finally over. Sarah wouldn't bother him again. Back at the shop that night, Daniel came down with a sudden fever, his temperature soaring to 103. He lay shivering in his bed, drifting in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of a gentle hand on his forehead, of someone helping him swallow medicine and wiping his face with a cool cloth. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw Grace. Always so neat and put together, her eyes were now bloodshot, and her hair was a mess. "You're awake," she said, her voice full of relief as she reached out to feel his forehead. "I've left the nursery in my worker's hands. I'm going to stay here with you for a few days." Daniel looked at her, his throat so dry he could barely speak. "You don't have to do that. Ash, I wish you wouldn't be so formal with me." Their eyes met, and he saw a gentle smile in hers. She hesitated for a moment, her voice a little rough. "Ash, I don't know what happened in your past, but I hope from now on, you can let me be there for you. I hope you can rely on me." Daniel was stunned. After all this time together, he was well aware of Grace's feelings for him. He wasn't made of stone. He couldn't let the pain Sarah had caused him close him off from everyone else forever. And besides, he was happy when he was with Grace. He paused for a moment, then pulled her into a hug. "Okay," he whispered. Grace froze for a second, then wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. "Ash, it's going to be okay. I'll take care of you." Sarah was flown back to the States to recover. And just like that, she was gone from Daniel's life. Without her shadow hanging over him, things with Grace fell into place naturally. They started dating, they fell in love, and eventually they got married. On his wedding day, Daniel stood at the altar of the little town church, wearing a simple white suit and holding Grace's hand. The chapel was small, filled with a few dozen of their friends and neighbors from Willow Creek, every face beaming with genuine happiness for them. The pastor stood before them, his voice kind. "Grace Miller, do you take this man, Ash, to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, to love and to cherish, from this day forward?" Grace squeezed his hand. "Edo." The pastor turned to him. "And do you, Ash, take this woman, Grace Miller, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, to love and to cherish, from this day forward?" Daniel smiled, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. "Edo." As they exchanged rings, the small church filled with applause. 3 years later, they had a beautiful daughter. They named her Lily. She had Daniel's round, dark eyes, but she had Grace's sweet, gentle nature. One weekend, after Lily came home with a perfect report card, they took her to the park for a celebratory picnic. Grace spread out the blanket while Daniel unpacked the food. Lily ran ahead, her kite trailing behind her. "Daddy, Daddy." Lily suddenly stopped and pointed to a bench across the lawn. "Why is that lady staring at you? Is she your friend?" Daniel followed her gaze, and when he saw the woman on the bench, he froze. She wore a faded gray blouse, and her long, unkempt hair hid most of her face. She looked exhausted and utterly alone. She had changed so much, but he recognized her instantly. It was Sarah. He suddenly remembered his neighbor mentioning a few days ago that a strange woman had been seen loitering near the flower shop. He hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Now he knew. He had only seen snippets of news about the Thompsons over the years. He'd heard Sarah had given up her inheritance and disappeared from Chicago, that no one knew where she'd gone. It turned out she had been here the whole time, watching him from the shadows. Sarah saw him looking, and a flicker of something, maybe hope, crossed her face. She tried to stand, pushing herself up with trembling arms, but she moved too quickly and nearly lost her balance. She steadied herself and opened her mouth as if to speak, her eyes a storm of emotions he couldn't decipher. Guilt, longing, and a deep, fearful hesitation. Daniel turned away and scooped Lily up into his arms. "She's just a stranger, sweetheart. Probably just resting. Let's go find Mommy, okay? I bet she's got the kite ready for us." "Okay," Lily chirped, throwing her arms around his neck and planting a kiss on his cheek. "I'm going to fly it super high." Daniel carried his daughter over to where Grace was waiting. Grace saw them coming and smiled, holding out the kite. "What's wrong? You look a little pale. Are you tired?" "I'm fine," Daniel said, shaking his head. He reached out and took her hand. Her hand was warm in his, and he instantly felt grounded. "I was just thinking what a beautiful day it is," he said. "Perfect for flying a kite." Grace smiled, ruffling his hair before gently patting Lily's head. "Well then, let's go over to that big field. There's more wind over there. We can get it flying really high." The three of them walked hand in hand toward the sunny, open field. Lily ran ahead, clutching the kite string, her delighted laughter echoing across the park. Daniel glanced back one last time. Sarah was still sitting on the bench, her eyes following them, a lonely shadow left behind by time. He let out a soft sigh and turned away, and he didn't look back.